This time on ChinnyVision, we're going over to the other side of the world. It's New Zealand story. New Zealand story was released by Taito in late 1988. Didn't really hit the UK and Europe until 89, and the home ports followed shortly afterwards. Taito, of course, gave us Bubble Bobble, and you'll see a few similarities in this game. So the intro on the Amiga version pretty much sets up the game. All your friends have been kidnapped by this giant walrus thing, and you've got to go and find them and rescue them. So starting off, very cute graphics here on the Amiga, incredibly close to the arcade version. Smooth scrolling. You're armed with a bow and arrow to shoot the baddies, and as you go through the game, the weapons do get upgraded to things like bombs. You can also capture balloons and little hover pads that you can use to fly around on that we'll see later on. Nice music in the background, sampled on the Amiga, of course. Level 1 very simple, and there we go, we've rescued our mate there. Versions by Choice Software, a name I don't think I've heard of before. The game was released by Ocean on the home format. And the Amiga version, which of course was bundled with the Amiga in the Batman pack, seems very competent indeed. Nice scrolling. Seems to be a very faithful version of the arcade game here. Flying along this balloon. Different balloons have different abilities, and for example some are bulletproof, some of them have more steerability than others. This is the first big baddie you see in the game, and what you've got to do is avoid dropping the water things on you that he's spitting out, and then you get swallowed up, as we have been here. It's got to shoot the sides of the whale there, and it's fairly easy once you get the hang of it. So off to round 2 now. I've got to be honest with you, this is a game I've only really seriously played for the last few weeks. I've seen it before, especially on the Amstrad, and we'll see those versions later, so we'll talk about them. So I can't tell you about things like if all the warp points from the arcade version are present in the Amiga here. But from what I can see, it seems to be a fairly faithful port. Here on ChinnyVision, everything you see is usually captured from original hardware, but we don't have an Atari ST, so unfortunately I've got to revert to emulation here. I'm always slightly wary of commenting about things like graphics on emulation, because of course you can't always be sure things like scrolling and the graphics are completely accurately emulated. It doesn't seem quite as smooth as the Amiga version. The graphics are the same with cut down colours, and the AY chip is playing in the background. It's pretty much as you expect the ST version to be, really. It's certainly very playable. You don't lose anything from not having quite that smooth scrolling from the Amiga version. Over to the Sega Mega Drive version, because I don't want to dwell on emulated games on the ST there. This version is slightly different. It's a Japanese import, and I've only just got this game. The graphics and sound are absolutely beautiful, perhaps even better than the Amiga version. And you're going to notice in a minute there's a little bit of a difference here. It doesn't have the same layout as the other versions. The Mega Drive version is derived from a test version of the arcade machine that Taito put out before it released the full arcade machine. And this test version had different level layouts, and the Mega Drive version comes from that. So it's completely different in terms of some of these layouts. The Mega Drive version also has less levels and is slightly harder. The enemies are a little bit faster. Also, I'm told, actually I've not noticed that much of a difference. I've been really enjoying playing this game since it was given to me as an import for Christmas, and I've really been enjoying it. Perhaps it is a little bit more difficult, but to be honest, I've been more absorbed in the gameplay. It's really, really nice. You can see we've got a little underwater section here, and I've got a weapon upgrade here as well. So I've got this laser gun thing that's much faster and better than the bow and arrow. On the Mega Drive here, this is really nice. I know purists are going to say, well, yeah, it's not the same layout as the arcade or indeed any other version. But you know what? It doesn't matter. Indeed, if you like New Zealand Story, this is a slightly different game, or slightly different level layout for you to play. If you've played the Amiga version, you think, I don't want to own another version of New Zealand Story, get the Mega Drive version, import it. Costs about £30 to do, and yeah, that's quite expensive for a Mega Drive game, but you'll get so much enjoyment out of this, and it's far less than buying a game for an Xbox 360 or a PlayStation 4. It's a really excellent port. Now into this little long underwater section here. I can see what this one thing New Zealand Story does. It tantalises you with where you want to be, but you've got to go around all the way around the map to get to it. And I'm running out of oxygen here, so there's a little air pocket there, so I'm going to pop up into there a few times and hopefully my oxygen should recharge. Here we go. Just recharging. I love this when Tiki, the main character, is underwater, that he suddenly puts on the scuba diver's mask and the little breathing pipe. It's really nice. Music isn't quite as nice as the Amiga version here on the Mega Drive. Usual limitations of the Mega Drive sound chip versus the Amiga, but you don't lose anything from that. It's a really nice version to own and play. Yes, you're going to have to import it from Japan, but it really is worth it. Why this game never came out in Europe, or indeed I think even America, I've got no idea. It's an absolutely brilliant port of New Zealand Story, as long as you take into account the caveats that I said earlier. Over to the Master System, and if you're expecting this to be the same as the Mega Drive, no, it's not. It's ported by Tech Magic, as you can see here, and it's a straight conversion of the arcade machine, same as the Amiga ST and all the other versions apart from the Mega Drive. The tune's a little bit more beepy here on the Master System, as you'd expect. And you know what? Coming straight over from the Mega Drive, the graphics on the Master System really hold up well. You know, sometimes in the Master System you get garish palettes and a lot of flickering on the sprites, but this is really, really nice. Everything you'd expect in New Zealand Story is here. They've gone to a lot of trouble to produce this port. The only thing I will say is, in New Zealand Story, if you're a little bit too slow going through a level, a little, I don't know, is a bird or a bat comes after you to speed you up. And what I have noticed on the Master System is some of the timings are a little bit more aggressive, especially on the first level. I was doing some of the capture for this, and I was just not even loitering around, and suddenly there the bird thing was to kill me. As I mentioned earlier, the balloons have slightly different characteristics depending on what you've got. Some of them require you to hold the fire button down the entire time when you're flying on them in order to try and balance your level. If you let go of fire button, you sink. If you hold it down, you rise. Some of them have more steerability as a goose thing. I think it's a goose that you can ride on that is much easier to steer. So there's all these different things you can jump on to fly around on. Overall, on the Master System, it's a really, really good conversion. Far better than what I was expecting. Only minor complaints with it, really, that sometimes when there's a lot of sprites on the screen, there's a little bit of flickering, but nothing noticeable, nowhere near as bad as games like R-Type that have a lot of flickering. Essentially, this is a must-own game if you've got a Sega Master System. Moving back to the home computers now, we'll look at the Amstrad CPC version. This should hopefully be at least as colourful as the Master System game. Similar tune to the ST version, but yeah, this is I've deliberately not zoomed this window up for the game here. This is actually the standard zoom level I use for the Amstrad CPC when I'm recording these things. So you can see it's a tiny, tiny window here. The scrolling is absolutely terrible. The brickwork doesn't scroll at all behind you. What does that thing look like dancing around there? It looks like Dizzy with wings. Oh, dear me. Yeah. I mean, I know the CPC has problems scrolling, but this is just a little bit ugly, a little bit jerky, and just not quite good enough. Especially when you're playing this back-to-back with the Master System version. You're thinking, oh, this is terrible, but hey, perhaps the other 8-bit versions are just as ugly to look at. I don't know. The levels all seem to be here. It plays like New Zealand Story, but to be honest, it's difficult to get past the scrolling and the ugliness of some of the graphics, really. Even though they're colourful, it's just a little bit ugly, a little bit of a small window, and just jerky and distracting. Not one of the CPC's finer moments. Over to the Commodore 64. Jonathan Dunn's done the music here, and he's done a very nice job of converting the arcade music to the SID chip on the Commodore 64. I think Tiki looks a little bit odd in the Commodore 64 version. That sprite just looks slightly wrong to me. I don't know. It just slightly odd. They've used the high-resolution sprite mode here on the Commodore 64 for that sprite, so it's not blocky and it moves very well. Scrolling's lovely. Not quite as colourful as the Master System versions, but you've got to take into account the Commodore 64's slightly muted colours over the other systems. But this plays really, really well. I mean, all aesthetic considerations aside, you don't get to see the chick you're rescuing in the cage until you've actually touched the cage, I see. We moved across to the end of round 1 here on the C64, and I don't know what it is about the whale on the C64 version. On the other versions, you jump inside the whale and then shoot it in order to defeat it. On the C64, and it might just be the way I'm playing it here, you have to stay outside the whale and just try and shoot it. I found it quite difficult to defeat what should be the easiest big baddie in the game. But I have to say, this is a very decent conversion of New Zealand Story. All the levels seem to be here. It plays really, really well. Really nice scrolling. And the thing it does is it really manages to capture the gameplay feel of the arcade, even though the aesthetics aren't quite there. And on a system like the Commodore 64, that's all you can ask for, really. Great value at full price. And if you pick this up for $3.99, it would have been an absolute bargain. Really good conversion. So over to the 48K Spectrum. And the thing that strikes you about the Spectrum version is it's a bit Spartan and a bit yellow. But if you can get past that, the scrolling is far less distracting than the Amstrad version, and it plays really well. The sprites are really detailed, and it's just the fact that it's running in essentially 2 colours here and has no backgrounds that sets it out from the other versions, because gameplay wise the Spectrum version's got it. Obviously here on the 48K version we've got nothing other than occasional beeps. There is a 128K version that has all the proper sound, A-Way rendition, same as the Amstrad version and similar to the ST. But if you take into consideration the limitations on the Spectrum and what they've had to do to fit it into 48K, this plays really well. There's even more versions of New Zealand Story than the ones we've shown here. I've shown the ones today that I can play via original hardware, ST accepted. But which of the versions to choose? Well, in terms of the 16-bit versions, the Amiga is absolutely brilliant, and the ST's a fairly good stab at it as well within its own hardware limitations. The Mega Drive version is interesting for all sorts of reasons because it has a different level layout and it was never released outside of Japan. So that Mega Drive version is especially one to get hold of. If you've got a Master System, boy is this game to own. Few games aside from Sonic push the Master System and look so aesthetically pleasing on the 8-bit console. It plays really well, it plays the same as the arcade version, and it looks so close to the arcade as well. If you told someone that was the Mega Drive version, from a distance they'd probably believe you because it's so colourful and so detailed. The 8-bit computer home versions, well, the Commodore 64 is the pick of the crop. I don't like that main sprite, there's something wrong there, I just don't know what it is, it just bothers me. But the C64 version plays brilliantly, and with its own graphical limitations in terms of the slightly muted colours, it looks the part as well. Amstrad version, I'm sorry, it's an absolute mess. The scrolling destroys it. I could put up with the slightly messy graphics, but New Zealand Story needs good scrolling in order to work, and that tiny window and the terrible scrolling just really unfortunately show up the Amstrad, and it's a real shame. Spectrum version is incredibly Spartan, but it's still a really good blast on your Specky. Yes, essentially 2 colours in the main window there, but it scrolls around okay, unlike the Amstrad version, and the graphics are monochrome and 2 colour, but they're incredibly detailed and look really nice. Again, unlike the Amstrad version, which looks a bit of a mess. So in terms of the 8-bit home conversions, I'd say C64 version first, Specky second, unfortunately the Amstrad last. But overall, the one I really, really recommend is either the Amiga, Sega Master System, or that Mega Drive version, which is going to cost you to import, but I promise you, it's a really, really great play, and well worth whatever it costs you to get a copy in from Japan.